Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Voice Memos podcast. I really hate that. That felt ingenuine. I was going to make my next episode a kind of silly, lighthearted, somewhat dumb, somewhat useful, I guess, episode about some 2026 predictions, which is kind of late considering we're already in 2026, but whatever. And my thoughts on gut health and coffee alternatives, because coffee is, well, let me scratch that. Caffeine is a very, 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 very prominent part of my life as a ADHD college student. So, I do think eventually that episode will come to surface, and I want to hopefully make it a little more, unironically, I want to make it a little less messy, because I think there's more thoughts I have on the topic of coffee alternatives, and I think I can make it a little more, maybe impactful. Like, I want to keep it silly, I want to keep it light, because this episode is definitely not going to be either of those things. Maybe a little bit, I don't know, we'll see. I felt compelled, honestly, like spiritually, a little bit, to record this after listening to the first episode I've ever listened to of this new podcast, and I think it's called Healthy Hoes. I'm not sure. That could totally not be the title, because I'm really bad at remembering things, but it had been in my saved podcast for a while, but I never actually listened to it. I mainly listen to the Anything Goes podcast by Emma Chamberlain, which I honestly could do a whole episode on how her content over the years has shaped my life and impacted me and inspired me, and there's so much kudos I have to give to Emma, because, like, I would never even want to be on YouTube or be doing a podcast, much less if not for Emma, so... Also, she had a video about her 2026 prediction, so there's some direct inspiration there. And I highly, highly recommend you go listen to it or watch the version of it that's on YouTube. But anyway, I'm going to try to keep this as off the cuff as possible, because I feel like when I, sit down and try to plan out things to say and try to, make it come out in a certain way, it ends up being very disingenuous, or feeling very disingenuous, even if it's not. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the concept of channeling, but it's something I definitely believe in, and I think I might have the capacity to do. And with that, I think that there's a value in purity, and streamlining whatever messages or whatever thought lines are being channeled, and I want to try to do that as authentically as possible, while also leaving space and leaving room for the emotional and psychological elements of the conversation that I want to talk about. So I don't really know what I'm going to title this episode. I actually have no idea. I've not thought that deep into it. I'm also driving, but it's okay. We can look past that. Don't worry, guys, I'm being safe and have my phone set up so we're recording and we're all good. But if you hear car noises, then that's why you're hearing car noises. Sorry, I just got matcha. And I'm, trying to do, some cleansing and whatnot. Some gut health unironically, or I guess ironically. I don't know, something just really deeply resonated with me today, where, I was thinking about kind of, and also this podcast I was just listening to, sort of vaguely referenced what it means to be in a state of suffering, and the responsibility to kind of pull yourself out of it, and that is a very heavy responsibility sometimes, and there's often times when you get in, a depressive episode or a really, really low state, once you do pull yourself out of it, because, there comes a point where people aren't going to really pull you out of it, which is like really, that's a difficult thing to grapple with, and I don't know how deep I want to get into that, but whenever you do like kind of yank yourself out of this state, it's honestly kind of like you've been underwater, you've been like very, very deep underwater, and there's all this pressure in your ears and whatnot, and like you finally pop up to the surface and you're like, well, what now? And it's like, you know, it's kind of shocking, and sometimes there can be almost like this spike of energy like after one of these really intense periods of purging, or I mean, let's be honest, in some cases just depression. And I don't really think there's enough conversation out there about basically what to do, like with that feeling of like, it's almost like newbornness, that's not a word, but like there's something very novel about, you know, just peeking out of that really low place. And for me, it feels a bit odd this time because, full disclosure, I was in a depressive episode for, I don't know, like maybe 12 hours-ish. I don't actually know how long it lasted. Time can be so contorted when your mood is like really screwed up. Whether it be through like a depressive episode, or on the other end of the scale with like extreme rage or whatever emotion or mood taken to its nth degree. It can really do strange things to time and how we perceive time. And that's another thing, is like time kind of clicks back into place when you come out of that, and it's strange. It's a really strange place to be, because like I feel like on one hand there's a bit of a pride that occurs where it's like, man, I pulled myself out of that shit, and like, you know, I did that myself. And I think getting older, it's sort of like dually a bit crushing and a bit liberating to kind of realize that like you alone can really do that. Obviously there's resources, there's help, you know, therapy. Obviously I'm not one of those people that are like, don't go to therapy. We can talk about my experience with that on another day. However, my feelings are a bit complex at the moment. Or like even like friends, family, support system, all of that's very important, of course, but like there comes a point and there comes a time when I think it becomes sort of staggeringly apparent, or some people might find peace in this, I don't know, some people might find this a peaceful revelation, I'm not sure, that like at the end of the day you have to be the one to really just like kind of disconnect from yourself enough to be able to reach out a hand to yourself and get yourself out. Like, and it's really strange, and it's almost like a bit disassociative, I think. That's how I feel about it anyway. I don't know. There's probably some complicated psychology I could insert here, but I'm not really feeling all that psychological today, unfortunately. But if anyone is a psych major or cares to leave sort of a alternate explanation that's more psych-aligned, feel free to comment that down below. I obviously know there's different like aspects of the psyche, and like maybe that has something to do with it. It's sort of like the ego, I don't know, maybe the ego is kind of pulling the weight here, which I think I saw something on like YouTube or whatever about kind of like unvillainizing the ego. That's paraphrasing, but sort of coming to work with the ego instead of antagonizing it. or suppressing it or just diminishing it, especially since I like to say we kind of live in the age of narcissism, or the age of pseudo-narcissism, depending on the context. And I want to do an entire episode on narcissism, truly, but we're gonna just refrain from that right now. Yeah, I don't know who all needed to hear this, or maybe I just needed to hear this, because shocker, actually, I am not very comfortable recording actual voice memos, which is kind of ironic. Like, the clips that you normally see, which you've only seen one episode, but like, the other clips that I've pulled for other episodes are generally from a conversation with someone, so I guess they're technically, what are they called? They're not called voice memos, but, I mean, I guess they kind of are. Voice messages, rather. And recording just voice memos as though they're voice messages is really a weird fourth wall break for me, and I'm having to, like, learn that. And there was sort of a lesson that I went through in the past few days that kind of, it forced me a little bit to, like, break through that wall that I had and really open up this space, like, that I create when I'm doing this, when I'm, like, channeling, maybe, I don't fucking know. Sorry for swearing. YouTube, don't demonetize me, please don't demonetize me. I don't have the energy to edit that out. What was I saying? I don't even know what I was saying anymore. I got so distracted. But, to like, create a space like this where, like, I can kind of invite, like, what's the word? Like, let sort of God speak through me a little bit, or, like, sort of, like, be aware of God's presence, and while doing this, and so, like, I feel like when that happens, it's like, okay, like, I'm not truly alone, because, like, my barrier before was, like, I can't record if I'm alone, and recognizing sort of the divinity of, like, a moment like this, and being open to that divinity, it kind of, like, eases that discomfort and that blockage. So I'm gonna try to work on that more. But yeah, what to do after you've pulled yourself out of the shithole. You know, this is not a one-size-fits-all answer either. And, you know, obviously the first thing that I feel like on a lot of people's minds is the notion of relapse, which could be very literal if you're, like, struggling with some type of addiction, and that's the thing that you've just, like, defeated. But relapse in the metaphorical sense as well is just, like, the cyclical nature of these highs and lows. And that is a worry. It's like, okay, well, I'm out of it, but how long is that going to last? And my pastor recently actually talked about the idea of foreboding joy, and how we often associate times of joy, times of glee, times of excitement with this sense of dread as to what terrible thing is to come next. And that is a very, like, human thing to do. Like, I don't think it's wrong, but it can be really devastating, and I do think it's worthwhile to kind of try to work to get out of that mindset. Okay, guys, I'm back. I had to take a little bit of a break, but I've returned. And I was honestly thinking about, like, the whole, the phrase of, like, well, there's, like, the calm after the storm, and then it hit me. I was like, wait, don't people also say the calm before the storm? And I sort of arrived at what I would consider maybe the root of this anxiety, or this feeling of forebodingness. And I think it's, like, not being able to discern between those 2 points of genuinely the calm that comes after the storm, or is it just calm before another one that's gonna come in. I don't know if that really made any sense. And I hope that, like, speaking in metaphor is, like, actually, like, helping. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing. I literally have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just, like, I just have thoughts and I want to share them. Deep breaths. Anyway, I was thinking also about kind of like what led up to this particular breakdown and depressive episode and all of that, and I do want to make an episode on that because it's something I'm very passionate about, and this is not gonna do the topic justice at all, but sort of to touch on a little bit of it, there was a lot of disillusionment between academic excellence and personal passion and blending art, my personal art, with what I'm doing for a class. And if you guys don't know, I am currently in college trying to get an English and creative writing degree, and I might double major in dance as well, which dance is a whole other topic. But I do dance, I write, I also songwrite a little bit. I'm very, very novice at the songwriting and at the audio production and all of that, but it is something I also hold a passion for. Kind of all around creative endeavors, dabble in acting, but at the core of it all is my writing and my storytelling. And if you've been around this channel at all, or if you look back at my old videos, that will become quite apparent as I talk about books and books I'm working on writing. I think I talk about some books I've been reading. I don't really know. I haven't posted on this channel in a long time, since the summer 2025, actually, not this summer, last summer, was kind of my year of like actually diving into YouTube, and it was exhausting. And I don't know if I actually will, but I kind of want to do an episode on my thoughts on YouTube, and trying to grow a platform as a young creative, and I could talk for a long time about that, but I'm not going to right now. But anyway, the source of this breakdown was essentially a fracturing of self within the academic world and the non-academic world, and it was really rough. And I hesitate to even speak in the past tense because it is still rough. I'm obviously not currently in a depressive episode, but that does not not being in that state of mind does not conflate with these anxieties and these stressors and these conflicts just going away, because in fact, if anything, I feel like they're more clear now and more prominent now that I'm kind of level-headed enough to analyze and reason through the circumstance. So, if you want to know more about what I'm doing and the project I'm trying to maybe write for this class, this very intensive class, comment down below, I guess, and I will definitely make a video or a podcast app, whatever. But back to sort of the main point of this whole thing. I also learned, which this is going to get really meta in a second, so bear with me, but I feel as though there was a lesson in the past few days where God was really trying to be kind of blatant with me and be like, well, I can't talk, oh my gosh, fuck. Like, stop making voice memos just voice memos. Like, that's what this podcast is for, and I've really been sleeping on this podcast recently. I've been sleeping on a lot of things because, you know, I've been burnt out, I've been depressed, whatever. It's not like an excuse, though. That's another thing, is like, I kind of gotta stop making excuses for myself, and when you're in that state, it's like, yeah, like, you can stay in it for a while, and like, I honestly think, like, you can't just suppress it, like, that's gonna lead to deep psychological issues, but you can't stay there forever. Hold on, there's a car pushing me. Let me get in the other lane real quick. You can't stay in it forever. And that's kind of a brute truth that I think I've been coming to find. And while I don't experience depressive episodes in methods, what the fuck am I saying? In terms of weeks long, usually, or months long, I experience a lot more condensive depressive episodes and, euphoric episodes also, that does not mean still that the same sentiment can't apply. The cycle can't go on forever, because if it does, that kind of drives you insane, especially as an artist. And in some ways you get like comfortable in these destructive cycles because you know how to predict what they look like, what they feel like you know them in and out, even if like that thing is misery or is frustration or is anger, rage, whatever the hell it is, it doesn't matter. You know it. You know how it acts and behaves, how it shapes you, what it does. Like, there's no element of unknown. Like, at some point the chaos gets so chaotic that it's almost organized chaos in a way, and deviating from that or doing something intentionally to your routine, to your habits, to your lifestyle, to your beliefs, whatever, there's risk in that. There's risk of, hey, is it going to get worse? What if it gets worse? Is it going to get better? What if that gets boring? What if life gets boring? And especially being young, when your brain is still kind of like, what is that thing? Your calcial gland is like, your gland is calcifying. You know what I'm talking about. You guys know what I'm talking about. The thing that like doesn't stop calcifying until you're like 23. That thing. Like, yeah. I don't have anything else to say on that. But it can be a lot. It can be a lot to handle. And these changes can look different for everyone. Not to come back to the therapy talk, but a positive change could be going to therapy. It could also be a negative change. There is risk in that. And, you kind of got to take some calculated risks. Likewise, maybe it's cutting something out of your diet. Maybe it's adding something to your diet. Maybe it's going to the gym. Maybe it's getting on meds. Maybe it's going to church. Maybe this list goes on and on and on and on. This is, again, not a one-size-fits-all situation. And integrating these factors into your life, it's a lot of trial and error. And it takes a lot of guts to be like, hey, let's try something different. Because I'm sick of insert situation or insert pattern. This could be removing people, which that gets really dicey. But like, this could be ending friendships, ending relationships. This could be so many different things. And it's scary. It's really scary. Because again, there's always the potential to end up in more misery than you started with, but there's also the potential to end up in a happiness that you've never known. So I definitely say take the calculated risk. Know yourself, know your limits, know your boundaries, know what you are and are not willing to sacrifice. Stay by those things while, mitigating these risks and analyzing them and being firm in your decisions to take them. But taking action is very important. That is something I've definitely learned in the past few days. And it's not gonna happen like I said, like you gotta sit in where you're at for a little bit. But just don't get comfortable there. I guess that's the best thing I know to say. But yeah, anyway, I really deviated quite a bit, but I think that through the whole Voice Memos thing, that I really had a communication block with that, which is ironic because I have a lot of communication problems. Like, that's something I'm very much working on. It's really bad. I think God was being like, why stop? Like, why just, you need to share this with the world. You need to share this with everyone. Instead of just like a friend or whatever. Like, that was the thing. Because my immediate sort of response to this whole episode was to isolate, to curl inward, to cut everybody off, which is what I kind of always do and I've always done, and suffer. And that's like not good. That's like objectively not good. And it's sort of a thing where it's like I felt like I couldn't have my cake and eat it too. It's like, I'm too much for people. I'm too much to handle. I need to dampen myself. I need to mask. I need to do whatever I can to not articulate or externalize anything I'm going through and make myself more palatable. And that is definitely not the solution. And if you are in that same thought pattern, let me just tell you right now, it's not gonna work. You can try it. I'm not gonna say like, oh, don't try it, because you probably will anyway if you're in that place. I know that firsthand, but it's not going to sustain you, and it's more than likely going to lead to more chaos and unwanted pain. Instead, for me at least, it felt like once I was out of it, once I was on the other side, God was kind of being like, hey, this is what you have to say, what you have to feel, what you have to go through has value. Share it with everyone. And so, that's why we're here. I think we finally arrived at the point of which I was trying to get to as to why I'm even making this podcast episode. Is that I feel compelled to put it out there, and that's not to say you have to have the same beliefs I have, or you have to believe in God or whatever. I'm not here to be like, this is not Amanda's testimony. But I do feel as though there's people that need to know that, like, this is not, like, they're not alone, and specifically creatives and artists whose lives and feelings and experiences coincide and morph with their art and their creation and their work and their livelihood and their academics. You're not alone. So if you don't take anything else out of this episode, take that out, please. Yeah, I feel like I've kind of exhausted everything I want to say, and I don't know what else to say. And if that's the case, then I'm going to start rambling, and this episode is going to be 30 minutes long. And yeah, so thank you for listening. I really appreciate it, and I will be back to talk to you more sometime in the near future. Bye, guys.